Good morning. Good morning. Season 6, episode 18, number 236 of the Decoded podcast. Saturday mornings at around this time, but recorded so that people can listen to it and watch it whenever they want.
Hmm.
So I'm going to take a risk and say, hey, Carlos, good morning. Because sometimes Carlos will watch from his classroom in the morning.
I like it.
I haven't heard from Carlos in a long time. And it was Ramona's birthday recently, I saw on Facebook.
Hmm.
So shout out to some of our old regulars. Let's leave
Yeah,
it at that because I don't know what's going on with these people anymore. I hope
I'm
they're
set. I'm sending Carlos a text.
oh sweet. I love it. Live texting. It's almost 8:30 in the morning. I know he likes his sleep, so I don't know. I don't know. This is interesting. Um yeah, okay. Thanks for doing that. And it was Ramona's birthday, so I wished her I was a day late, so I wished her a belated birthday. And then she said something about the cast, but she was traveling. She was traveling last weekend. I love it when Ramona does that, where she tells us why she wasn't here, like she has to be here. And I'm like, she doesn't have to be here, but it's nice of her to say, "Hey, I was not around, therefore." And I could lay into her and say, "You have a mobile device?" Because you could easily watch and listen from the mobile device. But I don't go there.
It's
Would be
true.
funny
It's yeah.
though.
The you've got me thinking about um this pod, right? This pod and its its staying power. Do you ever think about that? Like I've kind of stopped thinking about this thing ever stopping. I know we kind of went through a stage. We were sort of talking about that, like the what if, like, and then we just kind of eased into the whatever. We'll just keep doing it until something changes. But I'm kind of it's kind of stepped or landed in this space of um and I think you've said this before, like it's just you get up on Saturday, grab a coffee, go to the can, we're gonna podcast. No, but that kind of a
Yeah, yeah.
setup. Yeah, like it's just that. Like it's not overthought, right? It's not overthought. It's not um
It's
yeah.
literally our routine. Like, it's
Yeah.
our Saturday morning routine.
I would say the result of a routine, right? That 10,000 hours kind of mindset, right? James Clear 1% doing one little thing. Mel Robbins 5 4 3 2 1. Just get up. The Goggins push through.
Push
Like
through.
yeah, push through. You're not at your end.
I
Who's that
use
other? Who's the other dude? The eBay guy.
oh, oh, I don't know who the
The one that resells the mugs and Gary V.
Gary
He's
V,
like,
yeah.
you got to put the content out there, put it out there, put it out there. People will tell you what they want to pay for. Put it out there, put it out there, right? That like it's funny how I think it's over the last what's this season 6, so over
Mhm.
6 years, we've just kind of continued pushing.
Through past all those people, and they're coming out and saying their things. Like, we
and it
we
and
could
but it
probably
is
time our podcast by the times they came out and did their thing. You know what I'm saying?
yeah, and I would say it's also like it's but I think we've also kind of like taken those things that are just sort of statements and made them truth
Mhm,
because it
mhm.
actually that's how our pod kind of operates. Like it really is. That's all those things are kind of true.
Can I drop on that?
Yeah, you totally
Okay, so
drop
I've
on it.
got 2 things there. The first one is, I gotta write this down. Okay, so Goggins is the first one. Ah, shoot,
Would
I
you
think
would
I
you agree though? So yeah, you got Goggins, Mel Robbins,
who's the
James
other?
Clear, James
James
Clear.
Clear,
I mentioned that
1%.
that 1%. Just like you keep doing a thing. Like just
Okay,
keep doing a thing.
so here we go. So the other day, when I say the other day, sometime this week, one of my buddies, he and I were communicating, and he said to me he was just gassed. He's like, "I'm out of gas. I'm" he was telling me how he was feeling tired and spent. I said, "This is awesome." He goes, "Why?" I'm like, "Because it means that you still have 60% left in the tank." And he's like, "What?" I'm like, "What you're feeling right now means you're at 40 per you've used up 40% capacity of, like, your mindset and, like, self-talk and pushing." He's just he literally on the text, he said some quality things to me and then said, "Call," like, he was not happy with me, and then he goes, "Call me." So I call him, he goes, "What are you talking about?" I'm like, "David Goggins says that when you start to feel what you just described, you're 40% spent. You still have 60 in the tank. So shut your mouth and get back to it because you still got 60%. That's more than half. Get up and go." A little bit of Mel Robbins, right? Like, let's go. And
Yeah.
he was just like, after he, after I kind of gave him the talk, he's like, "Okay, I'm gonna go." Like,
Yeah.
you know what I mean? So there is the Goggins thing, but I love that mindset. Like, you start to feel low, but then you just stop and breathe. Breathing's been huge in my life the last while. Stop and breathe. Look up into the sky, get some light into your eyes, and then get back to it. You still have lots of room. You still have lots of fuel to go. So that's the first thing I wanted to say. The second thing, the 1%, I've got this tweet living in my head. So I call it a tweet. Other people call it writing. I call it both. I've got this thing in my
I
head.
like it.
Okay.
For those of you unaware of multi-form and multi-discipline writing, a tweet is just a piece of writing. Yep.
It is. And I spend a good chunk of time thinking about how to write them. So I've got this idea. I don't know how it comes out. I'm using pencil and paper, but I'm thinking digital. This idea, lots of people on Twitter are tweeting about, like, don't be like the 99% of people. Be the 1%, and this is how you do it. And I'm like, there are sacrifices to be made to be the 1%,
Hmm.
and people are not going down that road. I'd like to. I'd like to say, "Hey, what is the one or two things that you want to be in the 1% of?" Because it's not going to happen for everything, because that's not how the world works. That's not life. You can't do it. You can't be the top 1% at every single thing you want to do or be or experience. It's impossible. So, and this is why people fail at becoming the 1%. And then they feel like shit for being in the 99 because they're reading all this stuff saying, get out of the 99, get into the one. My
Hmm.
thing, what I'm thinking, what I want to get out of this big head is, if you want to be 1%, you want to feel that because it feels friggin' awesome when you're like at the top of your game. What are the one or two things that you want to be the 1% at? And then you go all the Gary V, you go all in. You go
Hmm.
all in on your strengths and you move. That's the key. It's not every single thing. It's one or two things. And then once you get to the 1% of that, you're feeling good, you're feeling fluent, shift. Okay, I learned this, I did this, I'm good with this. Now I want to acquire this skill, or I want to acquire this knowledge, or I want to acquire this fluency. I want to build capacity here. Go. But if you got 10 things on the go, you're going to live in the 99% because that's the universe will not allow you to get into the one if you're doing all those things at the same time. Thank you for listening to my fake. I don't want to call it the T word. Let's make up a new talk. That was my decoded talk. Thank you.
Mm.
I don't
That
want to
was
use the T
that
word
was
anymore.
that was life decoded.
I'm writing that
Hmm.
down. Life decoded. So anyway,
Hmm.
when you said that, that's what I was thinking. But I love how we've hit these different people, bro. When you said Gary V, Gary V is in a whole new world now, which
Yeah.
just hit me the other day. He's in the he's in the NFT. Like, he has a thing called Gary V Friends,
Hmm.
and I didn't understand what he was doing with it when he started it, but now I know it's all NFT art, and people are like I'm following and connecting with a bunch of people on Twitter that are like, they're talking about going to his next big summit, And it's one of these things, like, I don't know what a ticket costs, but when I see what people are saying, they're like, I got to sell my soul to get in that building. I just do one of these, and I'm like, whoa, Gary and his people, his machine, have created this whole new world. And it's like, don't forget, he's got other worlds too, where he's spending he's spending time sharing his knowledge, but making money and becoming more successful, because I think his end game, he says, is to buy the New York Jets. So he's going to need billions of dollars type of thing. He's getting closer to his end game because he
I
keeps
didn't know
creating
that.
things.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I didn't know that that's his. I didn't know that.
that's
But
what
I
he
could
used to
see,
say.
yeah, but I could see how that would be a thing. I could totally see.
So anyway, it's fun to talk about these markers along our journey of learning, because they've popped up, right? Um, and they still Goggins has a new book out.
Oh
I've
yeah?
not. Yeah, he's got a new book, a big hit. Everybody was lining up to get it.
I wonder
Um,
what that could like, it's funny, like, is that like well, it's just it makes like what is it that he's offering up at this point? Yeah, I'm curious. I'm curious, and who knows? Maybe I'll put it on hold through the library or something. But yeah, that does make me wonder, like what more is in the can for him? Because his message in itself, I'm starting to see how I don't know. Maybe you're kind of noticing this too. I'm starting to see how some how do I do this? That it's that some okay. I'm starting to see how it like you don't have to keep producing content. And I don't mean that in a negative way. I'm kind of just noticing that if you're good at finding an audience, you can keep using a tool or a piece of content with new audiences. And I know sometimes for me that can be kind of boring. Like I'm just like that it doesn't hold my attention. But I'm
mhm.
starting to notice how that is kind of a thing in some spaces. And I think I have to find a way to kind of be okay with that in I have to kind of be okay with that as I sort of understand how people market their products. And I've actually noticed this quite a bit. I follow up it's a company, I guess, but it's also it's kind of a company conglomerate, Button Poetry. So Button Poetry is it's kind of big in the space, not only on like like chapter books or full on books, but they support a lot of poets and spoken word poets. And I think his name is well, you have Rudy Francisco. This other guy, Neil, is it Holborn, and like they will kind of re-up their content or their books from like 7 or 8 years ago. And I get that as an artist, like you have to make a living. You have to find a way to like keep selling your content and move your content. And I kind of I watch how these like I watch the kind of ebb and flow of when they do these things. And sometimes I think to myself, okay, you do this because you're just trying to get top of mind of people because you're going to release a new book. It's it's no different like, Jonathan So, Peter LeBlanc, you have Aspinall, like all these people, even, Noah with the I forget the name of the book, but the one about
The one about the
turkeys.
turkeys.
Yeah, about turkeys. So I get the marketing cycle when you're sort of in full junket mode. And sometimes it means you kind of are doing things kind of out in left field just to say like get people noticing you. And then you get like hardcore, you sort of ramp it up. You ramp up that sort of media advertisement, whatever it is you're kind of pushing out to socials. But it's kind of funny. I'm starting to notice, maybe just I don't know if it's notice. It could be just like an appreciation for individuals that are still rocking the same message. Um, even it's I guess sometimes it can feel a bit like flogging the dead horse. But if I tie this back to Goggins, like I'm actually curious as to like what the hell else does he have to say? And I don't mean that, I mean that in a very like his first sort of kick at this was so pointed and clear. Like, are we now saying because and it kind of covered the first 40 years of his life. Like it was sort of up to that point. He's like, this is me sitting in front of you. Like it was, the biographical uh origin story. So it's interesting, I despite the fact I'm um like I get who that guy is and how he came to be. I'm kind of curious to see like what the hell else does he have to write about? Also because he's done so much stuff, it seems obviously and just spoken. It's that example, we've kind of laughed about this in the past. The book is thanks for buying my book, sucker. You could have gotten it for free in my feed. And so yeah, like Goggins is one of those dudes. Gary V even like I would feel no need to ever buy a book. This is how you do it by Gary V. Like what would be the point?
Well, I'll tell you. So Gary
Uh-oh.
V, if you've, so I don't just, I haven't just consumed what he puts out. Like I've consumed it, but I've also thought about it, reflected on it, and considered it. So this is what Gary has done, and he said it here and there. He'll give all for free. Like if
Mhm,
you're a business person, like when I listen to his advice, I'm not a I'm not a business person, but he gives away great business advice, or he gives away lots of free advice. So I'm sure
mhm,
people can use it for something.
mhm.
One of his one of his books is about give, and then ask. But the part that the part that people don't see or aren't paying attention to is as he give, and gives, he builds relationship. So then people buy the book, not necessarily because of the information that's in it, but because he is now their friend. They're just doing their
Yeah,
friend a favor. So there's that whole psychological piece that I've really dug into around. It's one of the reasons why YouTubers, some of them have great followings because they've built relationships with people. The
mhm,
people feel connected even though they don't know the person. It is wonderful psychology. So Gary, in my estimation, my assessment has brought all these people in because of what he gives. And
mhm.
he's built an empire. So not only is he giving you for free, but it's like a workout coach who's not overweight. Like if I start walking around telling people how to work out and how to become physically fit, and I'm going to sell
Mhm,
myself doing that, people are going to be like, "Dude, you don't look physically fit. Like, why would I listen to you?" Whereas Gary
mhm,
has all these businesses, he has all these like big corporations down stuff. So he gives, and then when he says he asks, "Please buy my book." I don't think people are buying. People are buying for content, but they're also buying because they're like, this guy's giving me so much, I can give him 20 bucks. Even though they
mhm,
never think it, that's what's happening. So I just wanted to throw that out there because he's alluded to that here and there. He said, I'm just being a good dude. And I want to be a good dude and I want to help you. I'm here to help you. And so it's like, can you help me and just give me 20 bucks for my book? Next thing you know, millions of dollars are coming in because of his book. I think good for you. That's what I think. Hey, good for you. Um,
mhm.
Goggins. The first book was called Can't Hurt Me. The second book is called Never Finished, Unshackle Your Mind and Win the War Within. So
Mm.
that's where he's gone. And you're going to love
So
this.
he's on the peak of the mountain now. That's where he is, right?
It
He's
said,
got a beard like you or me, right?
well, here, I got to read this because
Okay.
it's going to answer all
Is
your
it gold?
questions
Is it gold?
about the book. So it says, Can't Hurt Me, David Goggins' smash hit memoir demonstrated how much untapped ability we have, but was merely an introduction to the power of the mind. In Never Finished, Goggins takes you inside his mental lab where he developed the philosophy, psychology, and strategies that enabled him to learn that what he thought was his limit was only his beginning, and the quest for greatness is unending. The stories and lessons in this raw, revealing, unflinching memoir offer the reader a blueprint they can use. So not only is he going into his lab, he's giving you a blueprint, okay? Um, that people can use to climb from the bottom of the barrel into a whole new stratosphere that once seemed unattainable. Whether you feel off course in life, are looking to maximize your potential, or drain your soul to break through your so called glass ceiling, this is the only book you will ever need. Now, this is my favorite line of all that. Because if you know Goggins, every second word is a swear word. So
Mhm, mhm.
it says, in addition to the original edition, a curse word free edition is also available, but it's probably half the size of the regular book, right?
Yeah, 25% off.
Yeah, because you're missing 75% of the book.
Exactly.
Anyway, so that's where he's taking it. That's where he's at now.
That's interesting to me. That's interesting. It's interesting that he's definitely marketing to a different market,
Mhm.
right? If he's offering a swear-free version.
I think
Um,
those are probably that's probably not him. Like that's obviously the publisher who's like, dude,
well, it's
I
him.
can make you 10 more million dollars if we take out the cuss
So
words.
that's
It's
him.
like,
That's him.
okay, fair enough.
Right? Like that's him. Yeah. Whether he wants it or doesn't want, like, it's still him. It's still him saying, okay, like he's got a, but even if he disagrees, it's still him. Makes sense? So even if he comes
Yeah.
out afterwards and says, yeah, I didn't want to release it, it's still him. It's so now he's releasing a, I guess in some ways, a softer version, a more palatable version without the swears. It is interesting that he's moving into that space that he feels like there's a workable framework here that others can kind of do. In some ways, that's kind of funny because I would almost argue like that wasn't the mindset. That wasn't what, like, one of the things that really struck me about his initial brand was that every single conversation he seemed to make it like what I'm doing is ridiculous. What I have done is ridiculous, but I was entirely responsive to my own needs. I'm only speaking about my experience. I'm not telling you you have to do it, but I'm kind of just saying my life was crap. I had a terrible life, and it kind of led me to these choices, and my suffering became my strength. Like I feel like that's kind of like that path. And then you have, the spaces where he kind of showed how suffering, it was like this, iron sharpens iron kind of a thing. So his belief system, his health, his putting himself in these incredibly challenging, his naivete, maybe his ADHD, his craving for novelty, which put him in these scenarios of like, yeah, okay, I'll give it a try, and then in giving it a try, his stubbornness wouldn't let him stop. So he's kind of like he's kind of built in a way to be his own teacher, his own mentor, because he wouldn't give up on these activities and saw it through to the other side. And I can respect that. I would also say like some of the stuff that the the trials, the gauntlets he put himself into, he voluntarily went into. So I'm like at some point were you aware that you were making a product, Mr. Goggins? Like were you sort of thinking like this is were you aware of how like doing these things would ultimately lead to you being able to talk about these things? Or were you doing it purely just because you felt like this is how my life is and I have to deal with my life? Now he's coming out with the how to. It's not surprising. It's not surprising, right? Um, Content creators got to create. If you end up going there, let me know if you end up sort of like checking it out. Because I remember that was one of the first um, bits of thought fuel in conversations between you and I, where you revealed about talking about some of your challenges with reading and writing and what you're willing to read and write. You use that very much. I felt like that was one of the first sort of like anchors that you were hanging on to saying, if this is reading, I like this. and also what he was talking about, kind of you connected with the stories in some ways. So it's cool. Yeah, well, so it's out now. This book is out now, or it's coming
Um, I think it
June.
is. Oh, is it June?
I don't know. I'm just kind of
Oh, close the thing, but I'll get it back. Available now.
okay.
Amazon.com, Audible, Target. Shoot, I was at Target. I could have gotten. He's got some testimonials from The Rock, Joe Rogan. He's you know, it's fun to watch these guys at the beginning, and even their beginning like isn't their beginning. It's the beginning of when I caught glimpse of them and started
Yeah,
listening.
when you notice, yeah.
Gary V, I'm glad that I was kind of introduced to him 5 years ago because so much has changed. Even when Goggins started, he was on, like when I found him on YouTube, he was on some podcasts that weren't that popular. Or you know what I'm
Mm-hmm.
saying? Like
Mm-hmm.
he was just there to talk about his ultra running marathons and
Yeah,
stuff. And then people were like, who is this guy? And then people started to dig into his story and they're like, whoa, even like the story of how he entered into his the running is that story blows me away every time I hear it. The suffering he experienced in order to be able to get to where he needed to be to run these marathons and raise money for wounded warriors. That's how it started. He's like, I got to help my brothers. I got to help their families because they're gone now. And what do I need to do that? Well, you need to do these things. Okay, I'm going to do it. Well, people train for these things, right? He's like, I'm doing it. And then you hear what leads him to a mindset where he's like, I don't care what the obstacles are. I have a goal and I'm going to get there. And he's clearly said, like, whether it kills me or not. Because when you hear some of the things he's experienced, you're like, whoa, you know, that kind of sucks that you had to suffer so much. And, the story about like his heart, I think he has a heart issue. Maybe that's another SEAL. Anyway,
no,
there's
I think that's him. I think that's him.
okay, he does have a heart issue, I think, too, right? A couple of these guys are told, like, yeah, you can't be a Navy SEAL. Your heart doesn't work right. And he's like, I'm doing it, whether it kills me or not. But that's exactly what that organization needs. Like you don't need people that are going to get scared at the first sign of shooting or whatever. You need warriors that are like, drop me in there. It's time to get to work. So interesting. It's just very interesting. The human mind, for me, at the end of all this, it's about the human mind, that there's
Hmm.
so much potential. And it's so good for me to like hear these stories and read these things because then when I end up in a shitty situation, I'm like, whoa, this isn't what I'm experiencing right now is nothing compared to what people experience.
Do you do that? Do that?
I
You
go there.
actually, yeah,
I
you do go there, eh?
I reframe. I reframe like this is not the end of the world for me right now. This is just in my world, it's a barrier, but I don't need to like blow all my positive cognition on this. Sure, you take action and you reflect and you ask for advice, but at the end of the day, it could be 10 times worse. I don't know, that just seems to be me these
I
days.
never do that. I never do that. I never attribute and kind of um what's that word? Like how what
Like
you're doing right
compare,
now. Yeah, I never do. I never, and I don't, I honestly just sort of state in fact, no brag, just noticing my own sort of process. Do I notice it in other people and kind of most times I notice it on other people and there's nothing aspirational about what they're saying. So they're not using it as like something stable to pull themselves through. They're often using it something to drown themselves. Like they'll never be able to sort of like do a thing like this other person. Like I mean, that's it. The mindset in general is really fragile and precarious, like just in the general sense. Like when you exist in that, it's like there's a real dark side to doing that, comparing to where you are to what other people, what sort of where you are compared to what other people have done. Because as soon as you do that, you separate. in this case, like if you were to sort of compare, if I were to compare my overall, like where I'm at with my health, with what I perceive Goggins' achievements are, I completely strip his path to that. So and it's an unfair, it's an apple oranges kind of like a thing, because he's all about process and holding on to outcome. I'm about just noticing what I see in the mirror, let's say, if I do about health and, body image, let's say. And often, I don't know why. I really don't know. You've got me thinking about that though, because you've in the past said, you have said this before, that there's individuals that, my words, not yours, that either their experiences or how they've navigated their experiences you admire, you sort of look up to, and you sort of say you like how they've sort of done these things. And it gets me thinking about, like, I don't have anyone that I think that way about. Like, I don't have anyone, let's say, that I couldn't spend some time with. Does that make sense? Like, sort of people near me. Like, I respect and I admire things that you do. But I don't have, like, I've never had like lofty individuals that I would was aspiring to sort of like kind of do or be, or kind of even try. I find I've never been inspired by um other people's actions that way. It's a funny thing. I'm sure it's happened once or twice, but I can't account for it like you. Like, even I understand what Goggins did, and I love the mindset of Goggins. I understand what Gary Vee did, even like Wim Hof, what
Mhm.
Will Mel Robbins is doing, um, Simon Sinek, James Clear, all these people that have really kind of cracked open something that seems like they were the only one that noticed. They
Mhm.
were the only one that kind of tried it, right? Like, there's a real novelty and nuance to it. But I don't have a, and even Ryan Holiday,
Mhm.
despite the fact he has written, oh yeah, I gotta find that friggin' book. I'm having my moment, eh? I honestly don't know where it is. It's very strange. It's very strange. Anyways, despite the fact he has anthologized, he's kind of put together that, the Stoic, the Daily Stoic. When I read it, I don't even really look at the names of the people that are saying it, that their stuff is. And I never think to myself, "Oh, thank you, Ryan Holiday." Like, I don't, you know what I mean? Like, I don't, my brain just doesn't do that. It's kind of whack. It's kind of whack. I kind of just take it as content and consume it. It's funny how, and I put it into the machine and I try and do something with it. I thought for sure the book was on the corner of my table here. That was the last place I had to check, and I gotta go
Sorry,
back
bro.
and, damn, now I gotta go back and check other places. And you know what's funny? I have the money. I can buy another one, but I am getting a little bit like clingy with this because I have post-it notes and stuff. Like, I kind of like every once, I come around to February 12th, and I've written something on there, and I don't date it. So I'm not sure. Sometime in the last 4 years or whatever that I've had the book, I wrote that in there. So it's kind of neat to have a dechronologized sort of like account. I was like, yeah, I was there. I responded to it, but I don't know. I don't even know why I wrote that anymore. Damn, where could it be?
It'll come, bro. Maybe in the garage when you were doing all that work. Maybe you walked out and you were holding it and you put it down. I don't know.
That is something I would do. Or I put it somewhere thinking, yeah, that's somewhere I'm going to sit and read. I've done that. Anyways. But I
I
like how
love.
you bring that to mind. I like how you're bringing this to mind, this idea of, the people that we sort of look up to, and not, it's not, no, it's, that's not what it is. How we identify aspirational ideas and how we associate people with the ideas. I tend to disassociate. If somebody does something cool, I take the person away from it and I take the idea. I don't keep the person with it. And I don't know if that's problematic,
I
but I know that's what my brain does.
I don't know if it's. I mean, if you claimed it as your own, I would say it's problematic. But you're not doing that. Um, and I like that you stepped away from look up to because I don't look up to any of these people. Um, this is a maturity thing for me. I don't look up to anybody anymore. What I do is is I if I hear the message and I like the message, like you, I'll connect to it, and I still will refer to the person who, oh, I'm like, oh, it's a Goggins thing because that's where I heard it first. But it's so true what you're saying about these people who have these ideas. They're not the first person to have that idea. They're the first person to take the idea and maybe, I don't know, dress it up, market it, sell it. And then everybody else like, shoot, I could have thought of this, or I probably have thought of this. So there's a lot of that going on. But, and exposure, right? Like somehow, some way I was exposed, whether it was Instagram, YouTube, Twitter, Facebook. Um, and it's packaged, right? Like you and I talk all the time, but we're not dropping these mad um, ideas about how to live your life and how our mind works every time we chat. It's just not happening because there's so many other things to talk about. So these messages are packaged. They come at you like laser focus. I kind of like having them there because I can lean on them. It helps me when I'm talking to other people, but it also helps me when I'm in the middle of a funk. I'm like, this is not. Get up, count backwards from 5, get up and start moving. Like just these little things you build in and become part of your process. And sometimes I don't like this morning waking up. Mel Robbins was the last thing on my mind. I wasn't practicing any of her strategy when I look. I'm like, I'm not getting up yet. I'm going back to bed. Right. But funny thing, this week, there was no problem with me bouncing out of bed and doing my regular routine. You know what? This is kind of cool. I think my dopamine's depleted. I'm not feeling it. So if I don't do it today, according to the science, and this has happened to me before, tomorrow I'll wake up and I'll be hungry for it. I'll be hungry for my regular routine because I need to feel that. It happens. It's cool. I've done some reading and some learning about it, so I'm okay with it now. And I'm learning more about me. But it's cool to have these things to lean on. I think it's cool. I like it. So what's next, Clough?
I like the line. It brings to mind that line. It's something like, when the student's ready to learn, the teacher will appear.
Yeah.
Right? Because you got me thinking about, like, what was it? Right. Like, so what was it about? What was it like? So there's been people that you have mentioned to me, and whether either by experience or your connection to it, some of them have kind of connected. Like, um Gary V is very intermittent. It's very intermittent for me. I don't feel, I mean, my starting point for him is that he seems to, um he's managed to maintain, it's now a brand, but he's managed to maintain what he would say is his authentic character. He uses the swears, he kind of lives a very, feels like he sort of feels like he lives a very truthful life, and the way that he promotes and puts it out there. So I like that kind of popping in and out. I mean, I've gone through my phases of those, um, you know, the affirmational kind of people like Mel Robbins, and there's been a few other people that have been come through that vein of, like, they're just like, you can do it, get out there. Who's the other guy? Uh Belia, Josh,
Oh,
Jer, what's his name?
I can't remember his first name, but you're right. His last name is Bilyeu. He's got a podcast.
Yeah.
He's an entrepreneur.
Yep.
Yeah, he's brought a lot of these people out into the fore, which is really cool.
So there's like these
Tom Tom Bilyeu.
Tom Booger, yeah. So, like, these catalytic people, you're right. There's a person that has a pod, and then you're like, "Da, da, 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 da." I mean, that's how I met you. Like, there was sort of like, I was ready to start thinking about. I was ready to start thinking. I was ready for something to change about my thinking about podcasting. right? Because I was a listener and then came across the one from Hurley and then heard you on there. And then that led me to a Hurley event. Like that was the catalyst there. And I sometimes I like more the catalyzers than the actual people that they draw out. Because I feel like there's something about being the catalyzers that I feel an affinity to, these people that notice. And not necessarily in this particular instance, but I am a noticer, very much so. These kind of little ridiculous small sort of details. It comes out in my kind of photography, comes out in my poetry, comes out kind of like in the things that I perseverate on, which tend to be very, very, very small details. But I'm trying to sort of blow out that macro and get a look at its composition. And I operated with that way. And that's not me trying to be a catalyzer. It's just more that noticing. Like I just constantly notice some of these small things. Whether I do anything with it is another, right. That's where you sort of get into the motivation and the amount of energy you actually have to do any single thing. Um, but yeah, that whole idea of, the teacher appears. That moment is the antidote to doom scrolling these days, right? Like, so having a thing that actually lights you up for a moment longer than the dopamine hit, for a moment longer than that ludic loop of finding a thing, finding nothing, but then you have the hope of finding a thing. So then you find, right, that whole sort of, that path. Like, it was funny, like last night. So we had dinner. Kids came downstairs. I told you before, they love to have their sleepovers on the weekend and they'll watch TV and play video games in the basement. Karen and I are like talking. And then we were sitting on opposite couches and sharing funny Instagram reels with each other. So we ended up like, we were going to watch something and then we ended up doing like 45 minutes of just looking at our phones in the same space, but we were laughing and talking and then we go back to our phones. Right. So it's just, it's kind of like that, that just because I like to notice some of the details doesn't mean that I don't also fall prey to the other just like consumption things. But it's interesting noticing the noticers. I don't think I have any humans that do that very well at school, like around me. Sorry, wrong way. I haven't noticed. I have to make it about my intention, not about what they're doing. I haven't noticed any noticers at school. And even as I'm just kind of working this out on the pod, I think I really crave people that can do that. Like, really. So maybe that's why, like, I love how it feels like everybody's noticing Wim Hof again. Like, and all the dude has done is stayed the course. Like, he really
Mhm.
doesn't have, right? He's just kept on doing the same thing, breathing, ice cold water, yoga, music, and people are looking for it. And something, again, for other people, maybe that's the truth. The teaching or the teacher appears when you're ready to learn.
Well, and he's also done so the people so I think it from what I can tell and the things I've learned about Wim Hof, it started with him doing this practice that allowed him to live his everyday life, let's say, okay? And then somewhere along the way, like there are YouTube videos of him in the hospital. Um, actually, they're YouTube videos of news reports about
Mhm.
him.
It's
There's
more the
this,
lab. Like,
yeah,
it's
yeah,
kind of, he's at the hospital. It's the lab. He's
yeah,
being, yeah.
and the news is reporting on this weird human that can be injected with virus and it not harm him. And then him saying, "Of course it's not gonna harm me because I've told you I've mastered myself. I have practices in place where my mind can just let this stuff not affect me." And people are like, "What?" So yeah, there's him laying in a bed and he's got like 3 or 4 IVs in him and they're literally injecting him with viruses to see what, and scientifically, like, they're not live or whatever, but they're supposed to make you sick, and he's not getting sick the way he's supposed to get sick. And then as time goes on, He now has an app. He has his own like YouTube content. And it's kind of a sad story because in the middle of all this, um, his wife, and he has kids, his wife committed suicide. So he
Mm,
talks about like I've seen videos of him talking about like the positive effects on your mental health that his breathing exercises and his mindset will get you into. Because in those few videos I've seen, I'm not seeing a guy selling. I'm seeing a guy saying like, "Hey, man, part of my journey is my wife killed herself. Like, that's not cool. I have to go on. My kids have to go on. I don't want that to happen to other people." And that's like for me, the mining that I go through of these people, and when I get those nuggets, those hit me because they remind me this isn't just some dude selling. He's
mm,
like, I mean, if he's selling the fact that his wife committed suicide, that's a whole other thing, but that's not the vibe I was getting from what I was watching, the way the content was created and then shared. But
yeah,
anyway, um, it's fascinating. It's fascinating that there's a human that whatever he thinks he's doing, his body's not operating in the way that the 99% of the other people are. It's
right.
cool. It's like Johnny Kim. I'm going to drop another name. So Johnny Kim,
Is
um,
he the artist?
no, that's Jimmy Chow or Johnny Chow or something like
Yeah.
that.
Okay.
Johnny Kim. Okay, so so let's get to like the big things about Johnny Kim. So if you were to Google Johnny Kim USA, you would get hits on basically this guy became a Navy SEAL. Then as a Navy SEAL, he was a medic, and he then became a doctor. A doctor. He went to Harvard to get his MD.
Mhm,
Now he's an astronaut. So, but if you so everybody's like Johnny Kim, the ultimate dude, Navy SEAL, doctor, astronaut, right? Like makes everybody look like they're stupid.
mhm,
When Johnny Kim was invited on the Jocko Willing podcast, so Jocko, former Navy SEAL commander, comes out of the SEALs and uses everything he learned as a Navy SEAL and a Navy SEAL officer to help businesses grow. And his whole thing is discipline equals freedom. That's his tagline.
mhm,
So he has a podcast, and his podcast is rolling, right? And he invites SEALs on. So it wasn't that popular, relatively speaking. But then Johnny Kim comes on, and they're like, you hear Johnny Kim tell his story. Johnny Kim talks about being a kid. His father was a real jerk. Basically, one night, his father was abusive to his mother, and he would witness this abuse. And one night, his father was going to kill Johnny and his mom in the house. And for some reason, I don't remember, but they were able to get away. And then later that day, the police came, and Johnny's dad was hiding in the house, and the police killed his father. So his
mm.
father was abusive. His father tried to kill him, and then his father was killed, like I think in front of him, type of thing. So when you hear this story, you're like, oh my God, like there's a real human behind all these accolades that people only focus on. For me, that's the nugget. Who is the human? What has happened in this person's life to lead them to take different journeys? So I don't remember why he joined the Navy. I think he was like 18 or something. He's like, I'm just going to join the Navy. Joins the Navy. Somehow they're like, you should go do this training. He does it. He becomes a medic of all things, right? And then he says in his story, he's like, I watched some of my best friends die and I couldn't help them. So for me, then it was like, what do I do? Like, what do I do to deal with this? How do I honor these people? Well, maybe I could become a doctor. And we all know so the mental toughness of becoming a SEAL is one thing. Becoming a doctor, you actually have to have some brains. Like, you have to be a relatively intelligent individual who can learn and apply your. He does it. He he applies to get into university and the Navy pays for it. And then he's a doctor and he's like, I think I want to push the limits. I think like I want to, what more can I do for humanity? Well, I'll become an astronaut. Applies. And he says, I get the phone call. I'm in the grocery store with my wife. We're shopping. And the phone rings and it's NASA. They're like, congratulations, you've become an astronaut. Or you're entering into the
Hmm.
first phase of the training to see if you can continue on. Right? It's like, for me, I think those things are cool. But I go back to look at the trauma this guy has endured. We all experience trauma. What do we do with it? Some people are paralyzed. Some people are not. Some people need to work out of it. Some people are good to go. Like it's different. But when I hear his story, I can't help but make a human connection to like, holy shit, like this guy, who needs to go through that? Nobody needs to go through that. Then I think, I work with kids. What kind of trauma are they experiencing? I hope that they're never exposed to something like that, but it very well could happen. So for me, it's just this weird trickle down effect. It's like, who is the human? And I agree with you. I agree with you about noticing the noticers. Like, I remember running into Tom Bilyeu and thinking, who is this guy? And what kind of clout does he have to be able to talk to some of these people who, when you hear the name, you're like, oh, I know that name. But you don't know the guy who's interviewing that person. It's like, I did some research. He's some kind of entrepreneur in the health fitness industry, and his YouTube podcast, his presence there is very. He seems like it's just a normal guy having a normal conversation. I can't remember the name of his podcast, but it's about becoming better. Like it's about
I think there's, yeah, there's something like B squared. Like he actually does, he plays on the BB. I think I'm even thinking of the icon, like the iconography, his brand design, I think plays on the TBBB something.
anyway.
I like that, noticing the noticers.
Noticing the noticers. Who is the human behind behind the glossy image
Hmm.
that you might see, even if it's not glossy. Like Goggins, it's not glossy, but I don't know, I read his story and I'm attracted to the human condition, the suffering, coming out of it. It's a good story. I'm happy for him that he found success. He's divorced. Like, dude, I don't want to go through a divorce.
Hmm.
That would be that would be trauma for me. So it's like these people have to go through some, or they've experienced some really shitty things that I'd rather not have to experience. Like if somebody said to me today, if somebody said, "Hey, you know what? I'm the genie in the bottle, and I'm telling you right now, I can see it. I'll tell you right now, if you if you agree to the following conditions and suffering, you will be a billionaire for the rest of your life, and everybody will want to be you, and everybody will want to be with you." And I'm like, whoa, what do I have to do? You're going to get divorced. You're going to lose a child. And you're going to have an accident that's going to take away one of your limbs. But
This
it's
is
all
important.
yours.
Yeah, this is important. This is the, again, this is the where I'm at. Who I am is not where I want to be. And so you can look at the Goggins as a product, as a brand, and say, I want that. I have to have that confidence. But you strip it from the actual story.
Yeah. You strip it from the story. And so I've got this genie in front of me. Bless you.
That was so long coming. It was like I almost appreciate that I saw that coming way on the horizon. That sneeze. That
I
was a
thought you
good, like,
froze. I thought,
yeah.
oh, my stuff's frozen.
That was a good like 40 seconds where I felt that one just kind of like, here comes the sneeze. Yeah, you separate the story from the person. It's easy to become, to to have that as an aspiration when it's a singularity of an event. I mean, that's what we can do. That's shopping, right? That's window shopping in somebody else's life. And as long
Cool.
as you, yeah, as long as you can sort of like buy it, you're good. Which could be the book, could be the podcast, could be the t-shirt, who knows? But you start to parse it out, disaggregate it, and say all those things you said. Like, here's one menu of steps that lead to this person that's in front of you. So here's their story. I still don't know why I separate it. I think
That's fine, bro. I mean, that's who
I
you
think
are.
yeah, yeah, and it's just I like to sort of try and pull it apart a little bit, because on one hand I'm dehumanizing the actual, like, I'm doing that. I'm separating I'm doing that. I'm separating the experience from the human. Um I find that I just tend to remember the story, the experience more than the brand name. And I say that specifically not only because most times, like, I any of the people whose stories I've kind of absorbed and have provided some wisdom for me, I've never met them in person. So I mean, my on ramp to finding this stuff out is through socials, online reading, right? So it's already packaged in a way that's meant for me to separate it from the human, because it's just the story. It's just the content, right? I mean, it could be a video, but even when you choose to, like, as an example, any of the people that kind of grew up with Goggins and were there for that ride and there for those moments when he was younger, right? I'm sure they really do know this brand as David, like or Dave, whatever he goes by. Like, he's got a group of friends that knew him before he became a brand, and that type of knowledge. But they probably have the same, to a degree, access to the aspirational story as I do. But it's anchored so much deeper. They're probably never going to separate the actual person from whatever's hidden in the bio, because I so rarely get that. And I don't put myself in a position to go meet any of these people in person. I could, like you said, you want to go to, well, you've said, wondering about the cost of the ticket. That's the gateway to buying one. Like, I have no desire to go to a Gary Vee event. Thus, I would never spend the time researching how much a ticket is, right? I'm on the fence about Goggins' new book. I would rather hear the stories of people that read the book and, like, how you are using it. Like, what are you doing with that information? So, huh.
Good stuff, man.
I
That's,
missed Twitter for a moment the other day. Eh? Sorry, that was a hard
oh,
pivot
you did?
for a minute. Yeah.
Tell me about this.
I had
What?
a I had a I had a I had a moment that started it all. That's what it was. It was a moment that started it all. Because the moment that started it all for me with Twitter was I felt like the conversation in front of me, no one had any answers that seemed rational.
Mm,
No one had any answers that I felt were interesting. And I emailed someone at another school. So I was in the middle of a staff meeting, emailed someone at another school, and they're like, yeah, we're being presented the exact same stuff. And I email again. I'm like, can I text you? They're like, yeah. So that I'm texting. So we're doing like this back channeling via texting. Texting's never considered back channeling, though. You realize that? Like, it's, you say you're back channeling, it's not texting, but it is. It's the same thing. You're having a conversation while adjacent to another conversation.
mm.
And I think coming out of that meeting, somehow that seeded my brain, like, how could I do that exact same moment, but kind of do it in real time, semi-real time, depending on how much of a community you're a part of. And then that's how Twitter appeared. Somehow I noticed the teacher appeared because the student was ready to learn. I started asking, like, well, that whole texting thing and being able to branch out to a broader community, how do I know something about that? And then I think that's where I was like, hey, is that what Twitter is? And then that's what I made, and that's what I made Twitter for me. So I had a similar moment to that, not the whole like heavens open up, like Twitter's the product, but I had a couple questions that I craved reaching out to a broader community than what was just available to me at the school. And I also had a certain there was an expeditiousness to it, as and I wanted to get it out there because I felt like I could find out really quickly from individuals that are out there. So yeah, I had a moment. That's the moment. I think what was it about?
Equity?
Mm, nope.
Okay.
I think it was a spec ed question. It was
Okay.
something about spec ed. Yeah, something about spec ed. So and likely, and I think it was actually spec ed, and then something subcategory, something associated with ASD programming. So that's something in that vein.
But then you snapped out of it, right? You're like, I missed it. Ah, I'm moving on. I'll find my answer. I'll talk to somebody about this
Yeah,
something.
yeah, yeah. I didn't activate that. Like I didn't. There was no follow through. It was just more. It became remarkable to me that that part of my brain spoke up. And it wasn't just like, hey, by the way, it was like, go to Twitter, you'll get your answer. Like it was quite linear. Like, I mean, yeah, go to Twitter. Someone will help you out there.
I have to say though, so along the same lines,
Mhm.
well, not really the same lines, but with you connected to Twitter, it was weird for me at first continuing on with Twitter with you not being there and you not having said, I'm just taking a break. And I feel now like it's just weird. Like it's when you were talking about Twitter and I was like, yeah, Clough's not there anymore. Like today when I tweeted that we were doing the podcast, I say your name,
Mhm.
but everybody's probably like, who's Chris J. Clough?
Mhm,
Because
mhm.
he's not. You didn't tag him, so he's not. Who is he? Why would you even mention his name? It's like, well, he's the co-host of the podcast. So
Who's this random?
who's this random Chris J. Clough? So, and I still, it's funny, I call you Chris J. Clough because that was your Twitter handle, but there's no at symbol in front of it. It's just, I'm doing the podcast with Chris J. Clough. Let's go.
I it's funny because so you sharing stuff like that and people still share tweets and I come across tweets that are in other feeds and popping up in the browser. And it's actually happens more frequently than like we've gotten used to the active hyperlink besides someone's profile name. Like we've just really that's an assumption is that you're able to tag people, that idea of tagging people. But I have noticed I've noticed quite frequently people posting stuff up and they're just posting someone's name there. No tag, no nothing. And you know that if it's not tagged, like that person's not ever going to know that they were tagged in there. So it's a straight up hat tip without or a connection that the the mentioned would never know that they're mentioned. I mean, apart from a moment like this, you saying you're putting my name in there. So it's yeah, I'm imagining the weirdness on that side of just writing in a straight name and not having it either automatically change to a profile name because Facebook will do that too. Or not having to put an at sign in front of it. So it's just I appreciate the promotion. Thanks, man. I appreciate that. Yeah, but people ever, I don't know if anyone has I wonder if anyone has ever sort of said, "Okay, I'm gonna drop that name in there." Because I know if you drop my name into Google, you're gonna see content from me. Like, you're gonna see lots of different hits. You're gonna see a photo. My students do it all the time. They're like, "Really? You have a podcast? Wait, you have another podcast? Wait, you did this thing?" I'm like, "Yeah." "You do writing?" Yeah, it's actually one of those funny moments that my students seem to pride themselves, like somehow they figured out, uh like this cash cow moment. No, it's just I'm there. That's another space that I'm at. So yeah, I wonder if anyone has ever followed one of my other feeds because you've sort of mentioned it there on Twitter. I'll never know, but who knows?
Who knows? It's
Who
one of those
knows?
things, right? But
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
interesting that I don't know, maybe somebody sees the name and they wonder who's this guy? What is this guy's
Hmm.
story? Right? Because I was just thinking about I want to go back just to these I don't want to use the word celebrities, but like just these big names
Yep.
and they've gotten somewhere, but there's a story. There's always a story. And I think one of the things I crave and now I'm thinking about I'm just thinking creatively about how to do this, but or what I want to do with it. I crave people's stories.
Yeah.
Um, and I think when you seek out people's stories and they notice that you want to know their story, then that's where you really see people and
Mhm.
not like all the other things in front of you, but you actually see the person. Um, and it's weird because in my job, sometimes it's a little too close for comfort. Like, I'm going to be very vague here, but the other day I was meeting with someone and they were starting to tell me their story. But it was awkward because in that moment I was working. So I wasn't just Roland the person, I was Roland the re-engagement teacher,
Yeah.
and I was out in the field doing my work. And they were telling me a story, a very important story that helps me understand who they are, where they come from, which is awesome. But then at the end of it, I'm processing how do I respond? I want to respond, so I'm not going to not respond. I want to respond and honor this individual because they shared some stuff that makes them vulnerable. Because
Mhm.
that's the other thing too. When you tell your story, when you talk about your wife committing suicide, when you talk about being abused by your father tried to kill you, like this makes you're in a vulnerable space. So you're taking a huge risk. So I want to honor, I don't want this person to feel like the risk that they just took becoming vulnerable was just wasted. I don't want them to feel shame after telling me the story. But I realize I can only control me. So what I'm in my control, I want to respond to honor that they took this risk, but to also I'm being careful because I'm in the middle of the workday and I'm a re-engagement teacher, not a re-engagement mental health social worker. So I I want to be careful in my response so that I don't pretend I'm something I'm not, which is hilarious because I do have a counseling background. So now when I say to people, so I responded to this individual and I said, I really appreciate you giving me this time with that information because it helps me understand what's happening a little bit better, and it activates my compassion sensor. Like, not that I don't use it, but it's like ding ding ding, like Roland, you need to remember that we're humans here. Like, it's not just this is the time you're meeting with these people and you need to, it's we're people and people struggle and you're dealing with a lot of people who struggle right now. So I was like, I really appreciate that. Um, and then I moved into, um, it sounds like you may need to talk to somebody, and um, it's not. I'm in no position in this interaction to be the person who can give you more of what you might need to deal with these things. Is it okay if? And then I present options. I can communicate with this person. I can connect you with this person because I do feel like I have a duty to. I can't just leave it there. I have to be like, it sounds to me like you might need some support. Would you like me to da 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 da? I'm not just going to leave you hanging here. And I thought I was successful in that exchange. I listened, but my response was measured so as to not take sides based on the story and all that other stuff, right? Which
Mhm.
sucks because in that moment, that person really didn't need my measured response. But I like my job. Um, and I like not getting in trouble for stepping over or pulling into different lanes that really don't belong to me at that moment. You know, could I flex on that? 100%. I have knowledge and skills where I could enter into, I don't want to use therapeutics a strong word, but I could enter into a conversation that is possibly beneficial to that person, but that's not what I'm getting paid for. So I'm not going to do that. But anyway, I just wanted to share, like, I felt the humanity, but I also realized that I was in the middle of doing what I'm paid to do. So I try to be a little bit careful with my response in those situations. But I get a lot of that these days. People want to share their story, and then some other people are scared to share their story, and it's holding them back. And I'm just like, I'm here. If you want to tell me your story, I'm here. But I think that that story comes with things that I have a professional responsibility to deal with, right? So if there's talk about, harming yourself or somebody harming you or you harming someone else, like, I have to do something with that. And I think maybe that's where people then are like, I'm not going there because I know you're going to have to ramp this up, which sucks because I'm like, you got to talk to somebody because you're totally stuck. And I know why you're stuck, but you're just not gonna, you're not gonna. So anyway, thanks for listening to that one. That was,
Yeah, you're welcome.
I'm reminded about the people.
I also, in those moments where I have people um, sharing similarly in the similar way. And I tend to, and I think this is my spec ed classroom training, is I bring to mind right away that and it tends to be an instinctive response, but I'll introduce this feels like a really big idea you're about to share. Just to say, even though we're kind of social here, like I'll bring to mind, like, this will also change yours and my relationship in some way, because there's a relationship changing moment there when someone shares something really deeply. And I think that's my way to try and figure out who I am in that moment, and what the relationship moving forward could look like. Like, I'm down for random conversations with strangers, but I think my ability to identify it as a random conversation with stranger is identifying what that relationship is moving forward, that it is just going to be isolated. I may never meet this person again, that there isn't the obligation to do follow up necessarily. It can just be a blip. But some of those people that I do know that I'm going to run into again and again because they're at work or they're in somewhere in my social circles, I've gotten used to sort of saying, as the thing comes up, like, I am happy to listen. And then I'm also mindful moving forward. Like, I identify, what I'll do my base level to listen. And then often I'll also ask things like, can I offer an opinion? May I offer an opinion? Like, I'll ask for permission to sort of do anything next, because I'm still trying to figure out what just changed about our relationship. Because professionally speaking, we have a lot of conversations about kids, right? You're constantly, if I use school as an example, constantly having conversations around kids. And sometimes talking about the kids, we share stuff about ourselves. So you kind of do that next level up, is where you're not just talking about the kids anymore, then you're talking about your sort of response and reaction to the kids. And then sometimes that then leads to the next layer, which is, and this is why I responded that way. And then you get some sort of a glimpse at maybe something that happened just that morning when they got up, or something that happened over the weekend, or these kind of like big fixtures in their life that that are chronic, that they're still working through. So you move very quickly from um sort of cool collegialism to, holy crap, I had no idea. I could have never had any idea that this is what's happening in the sort of like in your background. So I like to try and pump the brakes just a little bit when I notice that we're moving through these thresholds in the relationship. For some people, I'll redirect them back a level. I'll actually ask a question that intentionally takes us back to a previous space, because there are moments where I don't want to remain completely open, and I don't want to move into that space yet with someone. And often, part of it is, you have the college university training in that counseling, and then, the experience, and then me, I have my guidance counseling kind of experience. So I get the guided interview and sort of like that sort of like investigative mindset that you can get into. Plus, I'm curious like you about people, right? So I also see that as that can also be that can work against you, because getting someone to tell a full story or more of a story because of your own curiosity can actually be harmful. It can be harmful to the person, that they can walk away and feel kind of shattered or shook up because, like, holy crap, I can't believe I just told that person the everything. Right. And I have had teachers afterwards come back and try and reduce the reduce what they've shared reduce what they've shared to kind of try and neutralize it a little bit. Yet yeah, I think it, in many cases, it's a bit of a fear response. Like, they're worried what I might think. Like, they're worried about what I'm thinking afterwards. Like, they're not feeling the relief of just having talked to someone. So I like what you're saying too, that kind of redirection, because that's kind of what I say too. Because I'm always like, appreciate you checking back on me. I said I'm good. Like, I'm okay. I can hold your story. I can protect the story. But that's often the moment where, if they're coming back with that kind of concern, that would be one of those moments where I would do like you and say, but have you considered sort of seeking out someone more professional or more tactical, so they're not just an ear, that someone can actually, help you with some strategies or help you with some sort of big picture thinking, so that this doesn't take up as much space right at the sort of like front of your view each day. So I get that. I get that. And at the same time, I'm very thankful, because anybody that's willing to share their story, um, that's some positive risk. That's some positive risk, and I dig it.
I don't know about other people, but when people share their story with me,
Mhm.
I feel this this ethical, moral, I don't even know what to call it, this like I feel this obligation to honor it.
Mhm.
And it's a funny thing because sometimes I've been in situations where I've been near someone or with someone that I do not like, I do not
Hmm.
respect,
Yeah.
and they drop some authentic information on me, and I'm like torn.
You told this story from the perspective, I remember on one of our pods, about, sometimes when we go and hang in the staff room, and you interact with someone who might not even be on staff, or you didn't even know, like, they actually did their lunch in the staff room. So you have this like random moment that almost suspends the physics of friendship and relationships, and stuff is shared, and you're like, it's like you hyperspace to a different place, and then at the end of the story you're like, oh, you're back in your body again, and you're like, holy crap, like, how did I thought I was just going to eat my leftover cold chicken, and I now know about how you lost your house, and like all these other sort of like details, and someone that died in your life, and you have an eating disorder. It's like, oh my gosh, like, how did all this come out in my 17 minutes when I had for my lunch?
So yeah, or the teacher workroom where you run in to make copies, and then there's a person walks in, they just start telling you something that you might not tell other people in that environment. And yeah, I'm like, it's one of those, I don't want to talk to you. I want nothing to do with you. But here we are, and you're telling me this stuff. And I'm programmed to feel honored and to engage authentically with you based on what you're doing to me right now. So it's like a mind mess up for me because it's like, stop talking. I do not want to be engaged in this way. I do not want to be connected with you this way because of my process, my way of living means that now we're going to be connected in a way that I don't want to be connected with you that way. So that's interesting. I mean, it hasn't happened much now that I'm like mobile, going from place to place. People kind of ignore me unless they have to deal with me, and that's fine with me. But um, I do crave though people's stories. Oh, here's a good
I,
one. Here's a
I imagine you get it. I imagine you get it though, but you're getting it now from the community. So you're still in that space, because of your interactions with families and being just outside the school. It might not be from the perspectives that you're used to, but you definitely, just by virtue of the fact that you're doing your work outside of, outside the bells and outside the walls.
I was in a
You're
school the other day,
Mhm.
and again, I'm going to be very vague because I don't want. I was in a school, I was talking to a staff member, and this kid came over. And and the kid is, you can tell that the kid's, I'm going to say different. I know we're all different, but this kid you could tell was different and very likable though. So in my time at this school, whenever I'm in the building, I seem to see this student in the same space, and so I'm getting to know this kid's quirkiness, right? Like um, I like the kid. I don't even know the kid, but the way the kid operates and the way the kid is, I'm like, this is a likable kid. And it's unfortunate that people treat this kid poorly because he's different. Because if you actually stopped and got to know the kid, you'd be like, this is a really cool kid. I want to be this kid's friend. So I'm in the middle of all that. And then the staff member says, I say something like, that kid's got some character, right? I'm like, it's entertaining to watch. I don't know if it's entertaining to deal with the kid all day, but it's definitely entertaining to watch. And then this staff member says, oh, do you know this kid's parent? And I'm like, who's the kid's parent? And then I'm told, I'm like, I'm in my head, I'm like, I really dislike that person. Like on a number of different levels. I want nothing to do with that person. I'm like, then it's the weird, I'm like, oh, that's that's that kid's parent. And I don't use the word hate, but I'm like, I hate that parent. I don't like that person at all. In all these years of being an educator with this person, I have no respect for this person. But that's their kid, and their kid is a really cool kid. But then I start to think, if I knew, if that parent somewhere along the way had shared the story of their kid and the struggles, and me getting to know the person more and better and different, I may not dislike that person because the context of me getting to know them is completely different. But that's just me talking about it. There's all kinds of layers. Like if I'm interacting with a person at work and I'm getting a negative vibe, I'm not about to drop in and tell them my issues with reading or talk to them about my father's death or like the key moments in my life that have changed me, right? I'm not going to do that in those moments. Other people might, I'm not gonna. So context is important, and here's the other thing. I really don't go to different schools and meet with people to cause conflict. Like I don't go looking for trouble. I don't go looking to rub people the wrong way. I'm open, but if they start pushing on me, there's work I got to do to not push back. But sometimes the pushback is necessary. So the whole thing is like it's just very interesting. It's just very interesting. Anyway, um I don't know, bro. Do you have anything else, or shall we check out your art and then move on with our Saturdays?
I just went super simple today.
I love it. Oh, I'm loving that dark black beard on my face. I'm assuming that's me. Yeah. There's a little bit of gray though in the chin. Your caricature of you always looks like you. Like it's just cool. I don't know how you do that.
Well, so for you, when I do it, I know I have to have the accented beard. So I knew like we have contrast, right? So I'm like all white and gray, a little bit of dark spots. You're pretty much dark, dark, dark with a little bit of light spots around the chin, right? So typically, the other thing, in order just to anchor for you, is I didn't quite get the right shape on your eyebrows, but it's the eyebrows. So it's sort of how the eyebrows kind of come down to the beard. For me, it's kind of simple. It's just the glasses and making the eyes look bigger. Like that's kind of like you put a gray beard and you put like the magnification, and there we go. So yeah, that's my tactic as far as doing real life pictures. Or the one thing that I did, it's funny. So I could probably change this pretty quickly, and all of a sudden would say, "Oh my god, that totally looks like Chids." Because the one thing that I learned, and I learned this actually so far back in the day at the CNE, and I was fascinated by the caricature artists. they would sit down there so quickly and do like a cartoon of something of a family or a kid, and you're like, oh my god, that's so extreme. But then you realize all they've done is they've anchored the um translation of this person's face by just seeing one or two very specific qualities of the face. And from there, you leave it to the viewer, and the viewer fills in the blanks. Right. So right away, I know just because of my method of doing this, the method of me doing the beards, which I won't say how I did it, but the beards were the first thing on the page. And what I realized as soon as I put the beard, like I put the beards and I put the details on top of the beard faces. And originally it was just going to be beards. I was just going to put the beards on there. But my method let me make a beard that's better shaped for me than you. I didn't do the right method for you. It kind of created a very similar shape to both of them. And so for me, I have more of that. There's a little bit more angular. For you, it's a little bit more sort of like rectagonal. And I didn't hit that. I didn't hit that on this. So had I, you'd be looking, you're like, oh my God, it looks exactly like me.
I, you know what? It's important for me to say that I totally didn't even think of mine. Like I see the beard thing. I was just focused on you and how it literally looks. It's the cartoon version of you. It's the glasses and the eyes and the way you do your beard. It's
So do you see what I mean? So you pick the right thing, right? You pick the right thing, and then your brain does the rest. I let your brain make the connections. So I also didn't want to use a lot of color. So figuring out the look of you and the look of me just in gray, white, and light brown tones was also my intent with it.
very cool. Thanks for sharing.
Sort of simple.
Sort of simple. I love it.
Sort
It's
of
yeah,
simple.
it looks simple, but sounds if anybody listens to you, there's a lot going on
They're like,
behind
what?
simple, right?
Clough? It's just a picture, Clough. Come on. It's just a picture.
I love it because it's decoded. We complicate things, but we also break things down. So
We do. I think that was our original tagline.
it was. It's more
So
than just
what?
a podcast.
Yeah, more than a podcast. Here's something that I keep meaning to do and I haven't committed the time to. And I think I've told you this back in the day. You know that maybe you didn't know. Do you remember, or maybe there's new information, the header of the ones and zeros is actually a poem, eh?
It is?
Yeah. And I
Like
wrote
it's
it
a
down.
oh, sorry.
So I took a poem that I thought was kind of cool. Not mine, it was another piece. And I put it into a binary converter and it flipped the poem into ones and zeros. So I have to try and find, like, I have to try and take some of that. So I think it's in the header on YouTube. I think it's on the header for the Apple thing as well. And then just what I did was when I got the string, I inserted your name at one point and my name at another point. So that's the backstory to that decoded. But it's a bit of an Easter egg because I don't know the poem. So I'd have to sort of grab a chunk of the text, put it into a binary to alpha, and then take that line and see if I could find the text again. Because I know I found it online. So in theory, I could do a text search and find the piece. But that's that you just because you sang in more than a podcast, that takes me back to some of our taglines that we've developed over time, right?
I did not know about the poem.
I
That's
thought I
cool.
told I thought I told you that. Yeah.
You may have, but like we talk so much that I don't know. Some of it goes in and stays, and some of it goes in and leaves.
When the
Um,
student is ready to learn, the teacher appears.
I gotta make a faith connection, bro. It's when more
Do
than
it.
when more than two people are gathered and talking about Jesus, he appears.
So yeah, so we know. Yeah,
Yeah,
there we
so
go.
it's a thing. It's a
So
thing in
wait, does
different
that mean
realms.
dude holds out for two people?
Well, I imagine. Oh, well, you're gonna get me technical on this, eh? If I
No,
want to,
I was being provocative, but that's just what it brought to mind.
it's a reference to the mass. People coming together.
Yeah.
When you come together and you speak his name, he is there. He is with you.
So
Um,
what is one of the elements of Jesus community?
um,
Like, you know what I
I
mean?
would,
Like
well, I mean,
that.
without using that word, I would say yes because they want us to gather on
Yeah.
certain days to pray and to learn more about him, right? So
Yeah.
yes, community. One of the things I don't like about my faith is the singing. I'm not a big singer, so when we sing at mass, and when it's part of our tradition, and I'm
Yep.
like, could we just get rid of that part? I don't like that part, but it's not
Do
up to
you
me.
do you like it to listen to? You just don't like the components of compliance to have to sing along?
Well, I'm going to drop some knowledge here that anybody who ever listens to season 6, episode 18, number 236, going to be like, Roland's a bad Catholic.
Okay.
It takes up time in the mass.
Hmm.
I do like to hear it, but it takes up time. It's like
As in you would rather have
I
X
would rather
number of
have
minutes back.
let's just do the math, the
Do
mass, and move
Gotcha.
on with our
Yep.
lives, right? So and as a teacher who used to organize masses and prepare the children to lead the mass,
Mhm.
it's like, okay, my nerves are going to be shot every time we sing because it extends it extends the mass, it extends. Johnny now has to, after the 2 minute, 3 minute song, Johnny has to go up and read. Is he going to remember what he has to do, or is he going to be distracted by the music? That's what goes through
Yeah.
your mind when you're a primary teacher and you've prepared your students for mass, right?
Gotcha. Yep.
Yeah.
That's
So
good.
yeah, bad Catholic Roland, but I don't mind the singing. It just takes up time.
I like
Um,
that. I didn't mind this. Yeah. I won't
just
get into
saying.
my issues. Yeah, yeah. No, that works. That works. Hopefully someday I get to hear you sing. You do birthdays though, right?
I sing happy birthday.
There we go.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
just check it. Just
Yeah, so singing, I don't know, bro. It's not something that I'm comfortable with. That's all.
Do you have a song that you do sing that you find yourself singing, like a song that is whether even it's sort of like whether you even like to sing it, but you find that if it comes up, you kind of will hum or kind of like say the words along with it,
So initially I would say no, but
right?
that's not true because there are songs that will, but because I'm not a big music person,
Mhm,
um it would be one of those. So the next time I'm driving somebody somewhere
mhm.
and the radio's on and I do that with a song, I'm going to make a mental note to
Mental
message
note.
you or polo you and say, "Hey, there it is, bro. This
What kind of
song."
music do you like?
I like all kinds of music. When I was like a teenager, I listened a lot to rap and hip hop, so I do
Yeah,
still listen to that now, but not like when I sit down to get in the zone and do some writing. Um, I will. My go-to are these YouTube channels with just chill instrumental.
yeah, yeah.
That's my go-to. Oh, Rochelle just posted, "Hello, Madame Cooker." She just here up. A mass at school is not relaxing for teachers, and you're right, it is not. It's like I used to be like, okay, kids, like mass is happening tomorrow at this time, so we're going to spend the next 20 minutes talking about expectations,
Hmm.
observations. Like we're going through this. It's like I used to prepare them, and then when we'd come back I would debrief. And it was never about punishment. It was like I would like to actually go to mass and pay attention to what's happening rather than tell Jimmy, "Hey, dude, put your feet down," like you're bumping into the person in front of you, or talk to Marley about, "Can you stop talking? Like, can you just look up there and stop talking to Jenny for like 5 minutes, really?" So Madame's right, and when you're leading it, I would argue it's even more stressful because you have kids who need to do things on cue.
Hmm.
And there are certain kids that you're going to have to help them, and that's not the
Yep.
issue. The issue is while you're standing with Jimmy and he's trying to read off a card, and Jimmy's not a good reader, but you're trying to empower Jimmy and you're trying to build his confidence and make him part of the community.
Hmm.
While you're helping Jimmy, Max is poking one of the kids beside him in front of the whole school to see.
Hmm.
Like, yeah, it's something, bro. Dominique says, no, it's not relaxing. So the Catholic teachers are coming out of the woodwork today, bro. The truth behind Mass in a
Yeah, you
Catholic school.
totally. So for it was funny. So I was raised. never had the responsibility. I'm in the public system, but I did have the experience from a parishioner when I was a kid. So I was the kid that I was watching other people, and I can remember so many times my mom's like, stop staring. But what I'm doing is I'm observing these stories play out, and I used to love it. I used to love it. And I would literally be I was just reading yesterday. There's this story about Seth Rogen and an interaction he had with Bryan Cranston, so the dude from Breaking Bad. And I think it was at a Golden Globes party. It was something, and I guess as the story goes, Bryan Cranston did a wellness check on Seth Rogen because he kind of noticed there was something kind of off about him. And I guess Seth Rogen he's known to smoke weed and get a little bit high at these parties. So I guess Bryan Cranston noticed him like off to the side, leaning against a wall. So he kind of hustles. He's like, "Hey, buddy, you okay? You all good? I'm just wellness check." And then Seth Rogen tells the story from the point of view of he was test driving some new formulation of edibles. So he was really stoned, but he also thought that he was presenting like he looked okay. So he thought he was actually holding it together. So when Cranston suddenly interacted with him, he said it totally burst his bubble, and he's like, "What do you mean? Like I'm okay. There's nothing going on." Like, and it was less about being caught, about being stoned. It was just that stunning identity shift of that he's not okay. And then from there, it just fell apart. He like went home. He's like, "Yeah, I wasn't okay. I needed that external. I'm not okay." Um, I like the story only because what I was doing when I was sitting in the pews is I was watching a bunch of people thinking they were okay. So I would, two little kids poking each other like this. I could see, that woman over there fast asleep. And like the people beside her, like I'm across the church and I noticed this old lady sleeping. And I actually knew of two people when I was going to church. I wanted to go because I wanted to see if they would still sleep in church. So I'm literally like looking around, like doing this just because I know where they generally sit. And my mom's like, face forward, face forward. And I would miss the whole gymnastics of it. Like I would be like, oh, okay, everyone's kneeling now. Oh, like everyone's got to stand up. And that would sort of be my cue to stop looking. But even when I transitioned either to the kneeling or to the standing, I would be sort of looking, right? Someone would kneel in front of me. I'm like, oh, look at that. Look at that. Their dress is caught in the back of their pantyhose. Or, oh, look at that. That guy stepped in something. What's on his shoe? So I'm looking over the pew, right? I'm like, oh, there's some money there. And I would sort of look over at my parents like I wanted to reach over because change had fallen out of someone's pocket, some old dude's pocket, right? So I'm the guy that's watching all these stories play out. And I would probably say, as an adult, I'd probably be the teacher watching you being stressed, trying to get these kids to do these things because they're just fascinating stories, and everyone thinking that they're acting normal. But to me, I'm like, this is awesome. These are all these like sure it's normal. What's entirely normal is for everybody to be creating a story in public. And what's entirely normal is to think that as you create this story, no one's friggin' noticing. But I am. I'm watching from across the church, like, oh my God, look at that kid keeps picking his nose and wiping it in the psalm book. And he's doing it on different pages.
So I love what you just brought up because as
Yeah,
you're saying it, it reminds me of my experience at school masses with my class.
yeah.
So it's always when my class is not on show, I'm watching them like a hawk, but I
Mhm.
am also noticing, oh, let's use Madame Cooker for, oh, poor Madame Cooker. Like so and so in her class is doing it again. And you see
Yeah,
Madame Cooker get up and kind of down, shimmy over to whoever. And then you see kids move. You see kids move silently because the teacher's directing and orchestrating. Then Cooker goes back and sits down, but you can see
yeah.
she's still watching her whole class. And I'm watching Cooker saying, poor Cooker, right?
You
And
it's almost like you know the exact lines that are being said. the closed caption, you know, the closed caption of what's being said.
And then you have the bro services teachers, and I use bro services because it's kind of a joke, but you've got the teachers that look out for each other. So if I'm sitting in a pew and my kids are good, and right behind me, one of the grade fives is acting up, I'll turn around, I'll give them the look like, hey, back off. Like my grade twos are listening to you, and your teacher doesn't need to shimmy from 3 rows back to talk to you. So zip it. And then when they do that with for me, I'm like, thank you so much. Because you try to spread them and you're not, you know, I always used to keep the students that required support and attention as close to me as possible or with an educational assistant. But sometimes it hits the fan with kids who behave in class and then decide in mass when the teacher's nowhere near them, they're gonna cause a ruckus. So you always need the bro services. Funny I use bro services because all my colleagues are females. So let's just say human services. Um, they look at the kid and they're like, "You better stop." And and it's hilarious because in mass you're doing this at kids when we're there to talk about love and Jesus and community, and you're like, "Be quiet." Not everybody operates that way, but some teachers just lose their mind. I've never
And
been a
I'm
losing
and I'm
mind.
and I'm and I'm at the back, sort of, you know, leaning against one of the posts, and I'm just sort of like, man, look at that story playing out. And then someone comes up beside me, they're like, want to say something. I'm just like, kind of lean to listen. And then I'm still watching I'm still watching Chids turn around and talk to some kid that's not his. And then I'm watching Chids turn back around to pay attention to his own kids or whatever. And then I watch the two kids that he just talked to. They're like, they're pointing, right? So I love it. I love it.
So
I
before I
think it's,
drop, oh, go
yeah,
ahead,
I'll just say, I want to let me make a kind of like a creative connection.
do
This
it.
is also part of the idea of stories. If I kind of end there with the ideas of stories, that's what was so beautiful about the Reuben poem,
Oh, Ruben, yeah.
right? Because it's this is like found text, which is like gold for me in the like poem world, is like to have a good piece of found text to anchor some part of it, right? If the poem is going off the rails, a good piece of found text can just like boom, lock it in place, and then the reader note will go somewhere. You can kind of, it's a bumper that they can go off on. If you're not quite sure how to start, boom, that first piece to kind of slingshot you into it or to end it. So I like that. But it's also something that I think a lot about in photography and wanting to grow more street photography savvy, because part of that is getting photos of people. Like street photography is not landscape photography principally. It's actually capturing street stories. So you have to have humans in there. And I'm wrestling, I will say right now, kind of struggling to figure out the balance between just doing like surveillance type photos where I really don't give a crap that I'm taking pictures of people in public, which legally you're permitted to do, and just actually approaching people that I find interesting and say, "Hey, can I take some pictures of you?" It's like I'm literally trying to figure out and courage up to have those conversations, because I also love taking pictures of people out and about with them knowing. And you see, so it's again the stories, noticing the stories and kind of trying to grab a piece of that story. That's it. I got nothing else.
Thank you for sharing that.
Thanks, man.
I think that's great. I'm I'm gonna step back to the
Mhm,
mass
mhm,
and some of the we've got Dominique and Rochelle who've got comments here that I'm going to post in a second, but I want to say
mhm,
there's always this moment. So as I'm watching, as I'm sitting with my kids, and they're not running the mass, so we're participating but not actively in the same
mhm.
way that the classes who are running it are. I'll be sitting with kids around me, and then we will see something big happen, right? Like Jimmy in grade 7, who always loses his mind, is like, you can see him percolating, and then something happens. And then I always look at my kids and I go, I'm like, this is what I don't want us to do.
Mhm.
Now,
We're good.
remember, I'm not talking to a kid with special needs. I'm talking, which is fine. Kids have needs. I'm talking to the kids like, you see what all of you are looking at? That's not going to be us today. So keep up
Yeah.
the good work. You will be rewarded. For the time you spend sitting here zipped and focused, you will have time to be unzipped and unfocused. Like I make sure you get that, okay? So there is a give and take, but I point and I'm like, that's not us. See,
Mm.
everybody's looking, everybody's wondering. We're not doing that. Anyway, I kind
It
of missed
it
that a little bit, but
it is the beautiful thing when your kids have capacity to get the
yeah,
shorthand and the
yes,
gestures and just the like this sort of a thing.
yeah, exactly,
And
exactly.
you
And
could
they,
just sort of like you could just gesture. You can get a whole essay in a gesture.
so Rochelle says yes, especially when you are watching your class at the same time. So the business of you're running the mass, you're making sure people are doing what they're supposed to be doing, but you're also watching the kids that aren't doing anything at that moment. Dominique knows this well. It's a game of organizing the seating plan on the fly. You think, I don't know about Dominique and Rochelle, but I know I would have an ironclad seating plan with the kids. So ironclad, they'd be upset. They're like, why can't I sit beside Jimmy this time? I'm like, because you don't function in the room with Jimmy. So how are you going to function in the church? And then I do this big belly sinister laugh. And then we go to the church, and I'm like, shoot, I got to get that kid away from that kid now because what I'm seeing is not good. So then the ironclad, like it's hilarious. I build my plan and I'm like, this is solid. I've got two mute kids on either side of the kid who will talk for days. And then all of a sudden, the mute kids, they hit unmute and they want to party in the church. And it's like, get over here. You're sitting with me now. And they got to do the walk of shame. Like they have to come into the aisle. Everybody's watching the aisle. I'm like, get over here before the priest walks down. And then Rochelle says, you need a plan. You need to plan A through Z. 100%, man.
I like the how little I like noticing this because I totally get the dynamics of everything that Dominique and Rochelle are saying. And I go back to planning out my wedding, and I can remember my spouse saying, "Okay, we got to do the seating plan," and I'm like, "Why does that matter? Just let people pick their own seats." And the look, but that's what I'm like, how little I knew. This was me also, like I wasn't a teacher at the time. I wasn't teaching. I was in kitchens, I was a cook, I was a chef. But it was just funny. It's like how different. I mean, I think to a degree, I'm still like I do want people to um pick their own space and sit where they feel comfortable and feel where they can participate. And that seat represents an agenda that I might never know if the person or the kid, the human, has their own invisible list that they've never shared with me. So to sort of I get the thou shalt sit here as a necessary tool. um just back in the day when we were putting together our wedding, I'm like, yeah, just let people sit where we want. We know the total number. Let's just make sure we have enough seats. And I gotta look. I gotta look for that. And then there's because the thing, like you're saying, here's the thing where we ended up, and I didn't know that this is what I noticed as we started to go through the process, is that there's no good way to do it. That so ultimately you have this tension between the compulsion to have the perfect, you know, seating plan, and invariably you have like this infinite number of problematic possibilities. So yeah, fine, have A to Z, but then you need subsection of A to Z, and the if then Boolean theory logic of, okay, and if grandma shows up drunk, who's going to take her back out to the front foyer so she doesn't puke on that radical aunt that's vegan, right? Like it's just there's there's way too many multiversal kind of. It's white knuckle season, bro. Like any seating plan is pure white knuckle season. And if you feel you're carrying the liability, or you actually do have the liability, I get it. That's like knuckles on both your toes, all your feet and your hands. Do
So
you
the
call
bet.
those? Do you call toe knuckles? Are they knuckles on your toes? Or do
Oh,
we
I
just call
don't
those
know.
joints?
That's a good question. I don't know what they're
What do you
called.
call toe? What do you call toe knuckles?
That's a good one. You're gonna have to figure that one out. I'm gonna leave that one for you.
Thanks,
Um,
appreciate it.
I will say the no problem. The best principals of schools, no matter how much you prepare for a mass, it's there are kids that can't sit still for any amount of time, and then you're going to take them to church, and you expect them to sit quietly, and all the bathroom goers and stuff, like, it just doesn't fly. So what I'm getting good vibes now at the good principals I've worked for, who recognize and realize and laugh at the fact that they know Jimmy's going to be a bit of a gong show, but they also know that the staff has done everything they can possibly do to authentically prepare Jimmy for the experience, right? Like, that's the thing. That's the thing. And then another layer, I know we're like taking this to the max, but another layer is the priest. How open is the priest to the students? I know there have been priests, and I won't mention schools, but there have been priests that have said the kindergartens and the grade ones will not come to my mass. Those little humans, they're not human enough for me yet. They're not coming. And then principals, good principals, arguing and saying, come on, father, I can't not bring my school community. And then other principals who just buckle and say no problem, and then they do something separate for the kindergartens and the grade ones. Like, dude, there are levels upon levels and layers upon layers. Some priests, they're like, you're not bringing that you're not coming in here again if they're going to act like that. And we're like, act like what? Like, this is what schools are. And the priest is like, that's not what church is. And it's like, oh boy, World War III, here we come, right?
Mhm.
I will say, I will name names. When I was at St. John's before COVID, and PG was the principal, and Father Cruz, who's still there, was the priest, it was gold. Because PG, he knows the school community, he knows the high flyers, he knows how things go. And he's relatively easygoing, so he gets it. And Father Cruz, fantastic. I don't know what he'd say behind closed doors, but in front of all of us, he was truly like, you're all God's children, and you're here. So he was like, thank you for coming into my church and participating. Other
Mhm.
priests are like, get that kid as far away from the church as possible. They're not coming. They're not that they're not welcome, but just get them out of here. I'm not doing this. Right. So now I'm feeling the vibe that I want to talk to my teacher friends at St. John's and try to get into the next mass at at the church.
It's
I will,
good.
I will have to, it will be, you know, everything will be on board. Um, but I would love to just stand at the back and just observe, and know that I'm not part of what's happening. I'm just observing and reflecting, and I won't feel the same stress that I do when I'm there officially with a class. So I'll keep you
My
updated on that.
Yeah, I like and part of it, it hasn't been a consistent experience for me, but it has to be it's a non-negotiable for me that the come as you are is a core tenet of participating in a religious community. The come as you are. Like, it really has to be. Um, you know, the teacher tactics notwithstanding, for anyone to be sent away or marginalized, right? Let's say if we somehow use an equity lens on one of these community experiences, any possibility of the person being removed from the experience because they can't be who they are, like, that's a really fascinating conversation for me. Now I get it. Everyone has an element of wreckers. But I remember quite clearly, like, me looking at people during mass. Worst case scenario is that I'm a little weirdo because I wasn't talking with them. Was I facing forward? No. Was I looking left and right? Yes. Was I producing like a big distraction? Well, not a big distraction. People might see me looking around, but God, I was also like 6 or 7 years old. So, like, what 6 or 7 year old doesn't? Did I look a little bit too long at some things? Yeah, but that's because the show was still ongoing, right? And it was more fascinating to watch, you know, that old lady sleeping and slowly starting to slide out of their chair. Like, that is good TV. That's amazing. Like, that's a fascinating story about to happen. Or, the other old dude that stands up and twice now when he stood up to sing, his pants fell down because they're like big droopy pants, right? Like, these are things that I saw happen and I loved it. It was when I was told that I had to adhere to the rigor that was one of the beginning points of me kind of saying, like, I don't think this experience is for me. Now, I've fallen out with the Catholic Church for a myriad of reasons. So it's not just because of that having to be corrected and I told to do church a certain way. Some of it is according to doctrine, some things that I don't like. Some of it is according to like the expectations, the stand up, sit down, the kneel, the stand up, sit. Like I'm not, I don't feel the compulsion to comply. And I don't want to be told I have to do that. And that's the only way that we do religion in that church. Now, again, just my experiences, my experiences. But I would consider myself to be a spiritual person. So do I still kind of understand and listen to and kind of like observe? And you and I have had some incredible conversations here about that what you're doing from a liturgical perspective and sort of building and maintaining and helping to sort of nurture the spiritual fabric and life of your students, and me trying to parallel that with student success and sort of like secular tools to get to a similar space. And I love those conversations where we talk about public and Catholic school systems and how we're still just trying to help people be good people. But yeah, I love this. This is awesome. It makes me want to go. It makes me want to go do people watching. That's what it does. Like that's what this whole thing, people watching.
So okay, as we finally shut this down,
Finally, yeah.
Dominique says that they have mass on Thursday and her kinder's grade ones will be right in front. And this is so this layer,
Is that the tactic? Is that the
some
tactic?
schools do that.
Yeah.
They go, from kinder all the way back to 8. Other schools sit with their book buddies. So like grade 2s might be with grade 6s, which is another tactic. So what you do is
Hmm.
grade 6 student, grade 2 student, grade 6 student. So there's yeah. And
Babysitters.
yeah. So you got the babysitters. Oh, this is cool. You got the in order from front to back gong
Hmm.
show. Kinders to 8s. You got the mix and match so that you can kind of control the vibes, the babysitters. Um, and then you've got the kinders and ones are nowhere to be found. Oh, then you have a numerical order of grades, but the class running the mass is right in the front on the left
Mm.
or the right. So it's like, oh, Chidiacs twos are running it this time. Okay, Chidiacs got the first 3 pews, and then we go kinder one,
Numerical. Yeah,
yeah,
numerical from there.
or not. It's mix and match. It's how every school does it differently.
And
Um,
every school is employing some tactic at
one
the heart
hundred
of it, right?
percent.
Yeah.
If
Yeah.
there's no tactic, I don't want to be at that mass. That's
Really?
gonna be an ugly mass if there's no expectation or tactic, because what
Fluff
happens
wants to
then,
be at that mass.
okay, but but then there's a lot of me looking at my kids going,
Yeah,
"Pizza
yeah.
pizza party, Chromebooks on Friday afternoon," like,
Yeah, exactly.
there's wheeling and dealing, right? There's
Yeah, the
unlimited
gifts.
phys ed for an afternoon.
That's
Just
awesome.
keep your mouth shut, keep your hands together, and watch the gong show, but do not engage.
Yeah, don't add to it.
Rochelle's getting the last word. So before I do Rochelle, I'll
Mm.
say this was season 6, episode 18, number 236 of the podcast. Rochelle says, "Good luck, Dominique. My school has yet to have a mass since before COVID."
Even virtual? Even a virtual mass?
I'm sure they've done virtual, right, Rochelle? Of course. Rochelle. I'm going to drop this compliment on Rochelle in my board. She is a pastoral guru. So when you got a question about pastoral, faith-based, you're not sure how to run a mass, or you're not sure about whatever you talk to Rochelle, she'll hook you up. um Dominique says thanks, and I think there's a lag. Like, I think by the time Rochelle hears what I said, we'll be gone.
That's okay. Well,
Chris
I mean,
doesn't mind.
it's the nature, right?
Yeah,
Free
yeah.
tools, free tools. I think um it's the fluency. So
Okay, well, hey, thanks for a good time today, Chris, and
thanks, man.
thanks Rochelle for hanging out, and Dominique. We've had a couple of other people show, but I don't know who they are. So,
Oh, I will say Carlos reached back out.
oh, nice. Is he doing well? He's okay?
I
Or you
didn't
can
well,
say hello?
I yeah, he said hello. He's I'd wished him a fantastic weekend, and he's doing the reverse check-in. So now, me noticing, well, you noticing we haven't connected in a while, so I'll reach back out. I'm probably gonna just drop to him like, you know, start thinking about spring or summertime because the food extravaganza will be coming back to Waterloo side sometime if he wants to come out for some more eats with us.
Right
So
on.
he's wishing me an incredible weekend and just doing a how's life going check in. So I'll drop him some chatter. So he's out there. It's good.
Awesome. Okay, dude. Well, have a good one, and hopefully
You
we'll be
too, man.
talking next week, same time, same place.
For sure. Peace.
Okay, peace. Oh, I didn't shut it off. Rochelle says no, not mass, just liturgies.
There we go.
There you go. There's a
Perfect.
difference, Clough.
I'll do the research.